you know me, Eliza Leone. I am the registered dietitian with Restaurant Associates here. Amina, you want to introduce yourself on camera? We have a guest this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be here helping out tonight. I'm excited to see what this recipe is gonna be like. So I'm here for the ride.
Thank you very much. In tonight's class, we are focusing on a one-pot dish. So this is something everybody loves. There are fewer dishes to clean, so much easier to make everything in one pot. And this dish is definitely, it's not a very traditional holiday dish. So if you're thinking about serving this during the holidays, it will likely not be duplicating anything else on the table. But to bring in some holiday flair to this class, we are going to be making a mocktail recipe. So we're going to do something a little fun. As always, the recipes are meant to be a guideline. Please modify. We have some spicy ingredients that we're using tonight. So if you are not very into spice, you can reduce that or remove it altogether and it won't, make a big change to the dish. So that's totally fine. And this dish is vegetarian, one of our favorite kinds of dishes around here. So that also means that when it comes to food safety, we have fewer things to worry about. So that's nice. We don't have to worry about raw meat, cross-contaminating, anything like that. We don't have to be washing our cutting board in between prepping different ingredients. So we are all good with that stuff. Looking at all the ingredients in front of me, everything here is safe to be eaten raw, except of course the couscous, which is kind of like a pasta. I mean, if you don't mind putting the overhead view, I can show what the raw pearl couscous looks like. So it's just little tiny like pellets. This is pearl couscous. There are a couple different kinds of couscous. So this is the particular one that we're using tonight. And it's called that because once it's cooked, it looks like little pearls. So that obviously you wouldn't want to eat raw, but you don't have to worry about any temperature control type of food safety stuff. Also, if you are eventually going to be cooking along with us, following along with this video, make sure that you've washed all of your produce before we start, except the leeks. We are going to wash the leek together because I want to show there's a specific method for washing leeks because they can be really dirty and like there's lots of like sand kind of trapped in there, like little granules. So I'll show you a good way of washing that. But be sure to wash your herbs. Even your citrus fruits, even if you're zesting them or juicing them and you're not actually eating that peel, well, the zest, I guess you're eating the peel, always make sure to wash these anyway, because when you slice all the way through, you are bringing any bacteria from the outside all the way through it. So always make sure to wash those things too. And let's see, also, of course, be careful with your knife. A dull knife is more dangerous than a sharp knife because it can slip. It doesn't grip the food as easily. So we are going to be making all of these things in order, as we always do, our plan of work. We are going to be making them all in a specific order so everything ends at the same time. Even easier with this dish because it's all in one pot. So we're going to have a little bit of downtime when we add the pearl couscous to the pot, and that's when we're going to make our mocktail. And the rest of it is, all in one pot, very easy. So, any questions before I start? Nope. Okay, cool. So, all right, I'm going to keep my handy list here. So I have some ingredients here that we're going to start with. The first thing we're going to do is marinate the halloumi cheese. So, Amina, if you don't mind adding the overhead view and keeping that up for us. I'm going to close out. There we go. So you can see halloumi cheese. It's a block of cheese. It's pretty firm. It looks kind of like mozzarella, but it's more firm than that. It doesn't crumble like feta. It's got a bit more, it's a bit spongier. It can fall apart at times, so we'll see how it goes tonight. But halloumi is the cheese that we're using. And we're gonna put together a marinade here. I'm gonna pull all my ingredients onto this cutting board. And I've got a bowl here. I'm gonna be adding all these ingredients to this bowl. So the first thing we're going to do is slice up our halloumi. So like I said, it comes in like a block like this. And this we're going to slice into 8 slices. So it's roughly like a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch per slice. So if you can see here, I'm just slicing down, some little pieces might fall apart, but that's totally fine. If you cut the slices thinner than this, they are more likely to fall apart. So keep that in mind. But searing halloumi is like one of the most, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Searing halloumi is one of the best ways to prepare it because there are not many cheeses like this. Like I said, it's firm, it keeps its shape, it doesn't melt. It gets a little bit more spongy, but it doesn't like melt into a liquid like a lot of other cheeses do. So that's nice. It allows us to grill it or sear it or something like that. So for our marinade, we've got this cumin here. So we have, let's see, 1.5 teaspoons of cumin. I'm just going to throw that in the bowl. We're going to do some lime zest and lime juice. So I'm going to first, I already washed these, so I'm going to take the zester here. If you don't have a zester tool or a microplane, it's called also, this is a really, really helpful kitchen tool. And there are a couple different ways you can zest something. So you'll see it's got kind of this like a lip on the inside. It can sort of act like a tray for your zest. So you could have the bowl shaped part facing upward and go down. So this zester is very dull. I have another zester. Hold on. Backup emergency zester. Okay, so you can try it one way, which is to go down the lime and rotate the lime in your hand as you're collecting this zest. And that way it all sits right there on top of the zester. So if you're wanting to do a very specific amount of zest, like a teaspoon or a tablespoon, this is just one way of kind of having a better visual of how much zest you have. So this is one option. I'll show you the other option. I'm just going to dump that into the bowl. Another option for zesting is to just have the scooped part facing downward and to just zest over the bowl. So the zest falls right out into the bowl. And I'm just rotating the lime. It smells so good. So citrus zest adds a very different flavor than citrus juice does. Zest is like a sweeter version of the citrus flavor. It doesn't have that tartness to it. And underneath, inside that scooped part, there are no blades, so it's safe to put your finger in there and scoop out. One thing I will mention, if you do have one of these tools or are thinking about getting one, it's tempting to just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. However, if you do that, all these little teeny tiny blades get squished down, which is exactly what happened to this dull zester that I couldn't use just now because it wasn't zesting. Those little blades got pushed down. So if you go only in the direction that it's meant to go, you preserve your tool. Is that something that any of you have experienced before? Definitely done that.
That explains so much.
Yeah, I mean, I have also done it, you know. I think I learned that from a chef and was like, ah, yes, of course. So, all right, we've got our zest in there. I'm just scooping out whatever's left in the zester. Just gonna set this aside while I cut the limes in half. So I've got the lime, I'm just gonna cut it in half so I can juice it. I'm gonna do both of these. Here we go. So they're both cut in half. Got a handy juicer here. If you don't have one of these, and if you like to make a lot of like marinades or salad dressings or things like that at home, highly recommend getting one. It makes the juicing process so much easier. Yes, it's another thing you have to wash, but you know, it's worth it. It's a great tool. So I'm just going to squeeze out, I'm going to compost these lime halves that we don't use. I'm going to squeeze as much juice out of these as I can. Limes tend to not be as juicy sometimes as other kinds of fruit because their skin is so thin, so they get a little dehydrated. They lose their water more easily. All right. So you can see there's liquid in there now, it's sloshing around with that cumin. I'm gonna have to mix that all up. Place these tools aside. Oops, took my last line out of there. And the last ingredient for this marinade is the garlic. So I've got these little garlic cloves here. I'm just gonna chop off the little root end, that little brown end, and then I'm just gonna chop these up. So because it's just going in a marinade, we might eat a few pieces of this garlic, but it's not like, we don't have to worry really how it's cut. We're just gonna be like rough chopping. The more you cut, the more flavor will come out. So it is good to try and cut it up into lots of little pieces, but don't worry so much about how the pieces look or that they're uniform. That doesn't matter as much. So we're adding this marinade, or we're creating this marinade and letting the halloumi sit just for, 10 minutes, I think, something like that, while we prep some of the other ingredients. So it's just gonna infuse a little bit of flavor, and some of the ingredients that stick to the halloumi are gonna go into the dish. So this could also work if you were not using halloumi, but if you were doing like chicken or something, you could make this same marinade. All right, I'm just gonna use my gloved hand and whisk this all up and make sure the cumin is all combined. All right, and now I'm gonna put these slices of halloumi in here. So also the way halloumi is made, let me show you an example. It's made, in a big sheet of cheese, and then it's folded in half. So you can see there's kind of that crack down the middle. It's a crack here, and the cheese goes like this. It's connected on the end there. So sometimes it will break in half. That's okay. If you can keep them together, if you can keep it as, a whole slice like this, then it just makes for a little bit more of like a pretty display. But, it all ends up tasting the same. So I'm putting the halloumi slices in here. I'm just tossing them around, making sure they're coated. And then I'm going to set this aside while we prep some other stuff. So if you have a sort of a wider, more shallow bowl, that makes sure that this little bit of marinade helps to coat all of those. So I'm going to set this aside right now. And the next thing we're going to do is prepare our other vegetables. Oops. There we go. Okay, so we've got a zucchini, an ingredient that I think a lot of people are familiar with. This is, I'm gonna chop the ends off. Whoops. Chop the ends off first. Then I will make it easier to handle. I'm just gonna cut it in half this way. Then I'm gonna cut it lengthwise. One of my favorite shapes for cutting zucchini is the half moon shape. So we get a little slice and it looks like that, half moon. So I'm gonna put these two halves together. And I wanna slice these fairly thin. I would say max a 1/4 inch, but of course it depends on your preference. Because we are putting all of this in a pot together, they will cook, but as we always say in this class, the bigger the pieces are, the longer they take to cook. And this dish, this is a 1-hour class and not even all of it is spent cooking. So the cooking part is not long. So it's definitely helpful to have your zucchini be, move it over this way. To have your zucchini be cut thinly. Just make it easier on yourself. I'm gonna do the other half here. You could also do yellow squash, which looks very similar to zucchini. It tastes very similar as well. You could do that too if you like. So we always talk about ways that you can modify your recipes, that our recipes are meant to be a guide and you can modify them to be what you like. We also always talk about the ways to make your vegetarian and plant-forward meals more satisfying. So what we're doing here is this original recipe that I found did not really have any veggies in it. And in order to make it a full meal and to make it more colorful, thus more enjoyable and more nutritious, I wanted to add more veggies. So the leek was in the original recipe, but the zucchini was not. We're also adding spinach and green peas. That was not in the original recipe either. Green peas are a good source of plant-based protein. So we've got some good options, good ways to make this a more well-balanced meal. I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go on. So we've got all of our zucchini cut. I just moved it over to the side. And I'm gonna get rid of this too. Okay, so now we have our leek. This is kind of a weird, it's a weird vegetable. It's really beautiful how it grows in this like woven looking pattern. It's super cool. But all these folds of leaves have a lot of stuff inside there. So this top green part is very tough. There are things that you can use. There are ways that you can use these greens. For example, any of the scraps that we throw away in any of our recipes, any of the produce scraps we discard, those can all be used to make a vegetable stock. Just putting them all in a boiling pot, that makes vegetable stock. It's very easy. So this is good for that. However, this recipe, we're not going to use these greens because they don't really cook well in the way with the method that we're cooking today. So I'm going to chop these and discard them. If you're making this at home, I encourage you to just, if you're not ready to make a stock now, just stick these in the freezer and put all your vegetable scraps in the freezer. And then maybe once every 6 months, you put all those veggies in a pot with hot water, with boiling water, and you make a stock out of it. So I'm going to set those aside. So now we're left with, I'm going to show you all the layers inside. So leeks are in the onion family. This is another type of aromatic vegetable, meaning it's got a very strong aroma, and its aroma is a huge part of what it adds to the dishes that you cook it with. So all these layers inside this leek make it very similar to an onion. So if you have any like tough, if there are any pieces on the outside that don't look great, you can always peel those off. I think I'll peel that one piece off. And this is also the root, so I'm going to chop that root off. There we go, set that aside. You can see all those layers. It's like the rings of a tree. It's really cool. So with this, I'm also going to cut it lengthwise and then into half moons, same way that we did with the zucchini. So always be very, very careful that the food you're trying to cut does not just roll out from under you. All right, we've got our two halves here. I'm going to flip it over to the flat side so it's easier to cut. And I'm going to cut these and then we're going to wash them. So I'll line them all up. And again, we want to cut these thin. These you want to cut even thinner than the zucchini. And in case I haven't mentioned this before in this class, it's helpful when you're cutting something, if you are like rocking your knife like that, it's helpful to keep your thumb and pointer finger on the very base of the blade instead of on the handle. If you hold it on the handle, it's harder. It kind of hurts your wrist. This is more ergonomic to hold on to the end of the blade like that. So if you're chopping a lot of things, definitely try this method and see if it's more comfortable for you. I know it seems weird to put your fingers on the actual blade, but you're not putting your fingers near the sharp part, so you're fine. All right, these ends are a little bit too tough. So here we go. We've got this beautiful like gradient of color, green to white with some yellows in there. Love a gradient. And I've got a bowl of water. Big bowl of water over here. I'm going to be submerging the leeks in this water. So I want to make sure they fully, like all the leeks that I've cut fit into the big bowl. Bowl doesn't have to be super big, but this is a commercial kitchen, so we have big bowls only. So you'll see that the leeks are floating on the top. And I'm gonna put my hands in here and just swish it all around. And I'm just kind of like going like this with my hands. I want to make sure that all the sandy, dirty grime that's in there is sinking to the bottom. So swishing it around a little bit more. All right. And I'm just gonna set this aside to let it sit a bit longer until we're ready to use it. So if you find that the leek that you have is like really, really dirty, if you can like see a lot of the grime and the sandy stuff in there, you can do this process twice if you think it's necessary. But I think we should be good with this one. So I'm just gonna set this aside and let it sit a little longer. And now at this point, it's time to start searing our halloumi. So I'm gonna bring over, actually I'm gonna put the zucchini on a different surface so we have plenty of space to work. And I'm gonna bring over the induction burner. And I have you can see the red pot over in the corner there. That's a Dutch oven that I'm using. It's a nice heavy cast iron pot. So, all right, we've got this induction burner. This is what I'm going to be searing the halloumi on. And got this nice big pot. I'm going to remove the lid for now. I don't need it yet. And what we're going to do before we put see if there's a good substitute if we don't have a Dutch oven. I would say any kind of pan or pot that has like a heavy bottom. That's usually what you hear where you read in recipes, like heavy bottomed pan or something like that. Just like a heavy duty thing.
Okay, I have a huge pot. It's fairly heavy. I hope that will work too.
Yeah. Another thing that's important when you're searing something is that it's a flat bottom, not like a rounded pan, something like that. You want a big flat surface, so all of the halloumi is able to have direct contact with the bottom. So, okay, we've got our halloumi in the marinade, and we are going to use some paper towels to like dab off a little bit of the liquid, the marinade from the halloumi, just to try to prevent it from sticking. The more liquid you have on the food that you're putting in there to sear, well, it's not going on my hand. The more liquid you have, the more likely it is to stick to the bottom of the pan. So we don't want that to happen. It will happen. It does happen. Not the end of the world, of course. But we want to try and prevent it so we can try and keep the halloumi in one piece. So, okay. So the halloumi has been sitting for a sec, just for a few minutes. Got that liquid underneath. And I'm just going to take some paper towels. You could use like a clean dishcloth or something. I'm just going to use paper towels and just like dab it. So I've got the paper towels. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn on my burner. I'm going to put it to medium high. It's always better to start with that. If you go right to high, it can be kind of too much when you first put the food in there to sear. So we'll start with medium high and see how that goes. So, all right. So I'm just putting the halloumi in a paper towel and just dabbing it. So you'll see the liquid that came off of it. And I'm just gonna put it on my cutting board next to my work surface. And just keep on doing that while this pan is heating up. So I was reading about halloumi in preparation for this class. Halloumi originates from the island of Cyprus, which is in the Mediterranean Sea, off the southern coast of Turkey. And it's estimated that halloumi has been around since 400 AD, which is amazing. That obviously it must be good because it's been around for so long. And it's so cool to think of, you know, we're still using these classic ingredients today. And when it comes to, you know, if you think about different kinds of cheeses, like I said, it's similar to mozzarella, but it's a bit more firm. Generally the more liquid or the more, you know, kind of the less formed the cheese is, the more carbohydrates it tends to have when you're thinking about nutrition content. And the firmer it is, the more protein and fat it has. So if you think about ricotta or cottage cheese, those are definitely softer kinds of cheese, more liquidy. Those have a higher carbohydrate content. And the reason for that is because there's, you know, the two parts of the milk, the liquid and the solid. The halloumi, they get rid of all the liquid. But with cottage cheese or ricotta, they keep some of that liquid. So the liquid is the part that has the carbohydrates in it, the lactose, the sugar that comes from milk. All right, so we got all of our slices are relatively dry. That's good. I can feel the heat coming up from here. So I'm gonna use some spray oil. This is another attempt to try and make it so this doesn't stick. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so I'm just gonna place, actually it doesn't look like that coated quite enough. Okay, I'm gonna just place this in here. And it's sizzling right off the bat. That's what you want when it comes to searing something. And with one 8-ounce pack of halloumi, you should be able to fit that whole thing in a pan about this size. So those are, I think Zoom filters out the background noise. So I don't know if you can hear that sizzle, but those are definitely sizzling. And I've got two tools here. I'm not sure which one is going to be most appropriate to use. Might be easier to use a spatula to flip these, or I might want to use tongs. So I've got them both just in case. And I want to use tongs, and I'm just going to check one right now. One of the ones that I put in early. See how it's going. There's a little bit of brown in there, and it is sticking a little bit. So this sticking is also likely because of the marinade. Ooh, look at that sear. Oh, wow, wow, that looks great. So it's happening very fast, as you can see. So you definitely don't want to walk away from this. And if you're doing this at home, make sure that you have your fan on. Thankfully, there are big vents in a commercial kitchen, so we don't need to worry about that. All right, I'm gonna turn that down. I'm trying to loosen these up underneath, and I'm going to flip them over.
Trying to save calories by using the spray instead of like olive oil, or you don't want to use olive oil?
Olive oil has a lower smoke point, meaning it takes less heat to make olive oil like get your whole kitchen smoky. So if you were to use an oil like that, I would say use canola. But the spray oil it is a lower calorie option, but it also is just another attempt to make it not stick. So I'm flipping all of these over. You can see some of them have some really nice browning on the bottom, which is awesome. And like I said, halloumi doesn't melt. It doesn't become it doesn't become, liquidy. It's just softens up a little bit and just gets a little bit more spongy. So this is probably good. I'm gonna turn this off. Goes very fast. This induction burner also goes really, heats up very quickly. So maybe a little different than what you have at home. So yes, this is a one pot dish, but we sear, we remove the halloumi, and then we put everything else in there and add the halloumi back at the end. So I'm gonna just use another container and just put this in that container. So let me grab. All right. So I wanna, underneath, got a good brown. Got some good color on both sides. That's awesome. And most of these slices kept together. Some of them fell apart a little bit, so totally fine. Obviously, it all tastes the same. So scooping all these out, and you can tell there's some brown stuff stuck to the bottom. So that brown stuff, I mean, you two know because you attend our classes, we're going to be deglazing this pan. We're going to be saving all that brown that's stuck to the bottom and using that flavor in this dish. If we were not doing a one pot dish, then all of this stuff stuck to the bottom would now be going to waste. So I love a good chard. Charred flavor really brings depth to your dish, All right, so I'm putting this halloumi aside. And now we're gonna start cooking the veggies. So I am gonna add some oil here. I'm gonna turn my burner to medium. And I'm gonna do some oil. All right. So that's already heated up. I'm gonna add the zucchini and the leeks. So I'll start with the zucchini since it's right in front of me. And we're just gonna do this we're gonna let the zucchini and the leeks cook just for like a few minutes. Let me add the leeks in. So we've got this big bowl of water. I'm just kind of like fishing the leeks out. And if you can squeeze them out, then do that. All right, so the leeks are in there. Okay. And so I mentioned that leeks are an aromatic vegetable. And because there's all these little layers, just like an onion, what we like to say for the aromatic vegetables that we add to dishes like this is saute it until it becomes translucent. And that lets you know. So if you're doing onion or leeks or shallots, when they become translucent, that's how you know it's softened up enough that you can move on to the next step. So the zucchini won't be translucent because that's a different kind of vegetable and it's thicker than the leeks. So we're just going to toss this around. And the brown stuff is still on the bottom there, but don't be worried because when we add the stock later, it's going to break loose all that flavor from the bottom. You can scrape it off a little bit, see if it comes off, but no need to worry about that right now. So because this burner is pretty quick, the leeks are almost there. I'm going to show you, so, wooden spoon is a very handy kitchen tool, especially when you're trying to see if something is translucent, because looking at You can see those white pieces, the dark color of the spoon comes through. So I would call that translucent. And we're ready for the next step now. So our next step is we're gonna add some spices and some extra flavors. So the spicy ingredient that I was talking about is harissa paste. So I'm gonna scoop that in there. So looks like this. Harissa paste, it's made from spicy peppers that are roasted. Scoop with my gloved hand. These peppers are roasted, and in the paste, there's also, I'm doing tomato paste as well, 2 teaspoons of tomato paste. But in the harissa paste, there's also garlic, there's olive oil, there are some other flavors in there. So that harissa paste is really good. Sometimes you can get just dried harissa, and that's different. That doesn't have all those other things in it. We've also got some spices here. This is turmeric and cinnamon. So now that we're adding these red and yellow things, the color of this dish is about to dramatically change here. It's going to become very orangey, yellowy. So we're tossing this all around. And tomato paste is something that you see in a lot of recipes. Tomato paste is just very concentrated tomatoes. You know, they're cooked down, they're dehydrated a bit. So we can use that paste to give us that really concentrated vegetable flavor that helps to enhance the overall flavor of this. So I hope you can see from the camera now, but it's like very yellow. Everything just changed color now. Turmeric, that yellowy spice that we added, is known for its yellow color. Turmeric is used as a natural, like, coloring agent in foods as well. If you ever see, like, you know, natural candies or something that are colored with like beetroot, you know, the purple ones are colored with beet juice and the yellow ones are colored with turmeric. So it's just a really, really concentrated pigment. All right. So that's all tossed around. The zucchini is also starting to soften up a bit. It's got, you know, more flexibility than it did before. So that's nice and soft. All right. And the next thing we're going to add is our couscous and our stock. So this is a pretty basic, you could follow this, you know, this recipe, these instructions with a lot of different types of ingredients where if you were doing chicken instead of halloumi, you sear the chicken, remove it, add your onions, maybe some garlic, whatever other vegetables you're using, you know, break it all down, add your stock, add whatever else has to cook. You know, sometimes it's potatoes, sometimes it's pasta, sometimes whatever. And then you combine everything at the end. This process is something that can be used, you know, in a million different ways. So definitely want to get rid of my turmeric glove because for some reason, I'm wearing white right now. I don't know why. Okay, I'm gonna put this glove on my cut glove hand. And all right, so I want to talk to you about couscous also. So I showed you this before. This is pearl couscous. Sometimes people think of couscous as a whole grain. However, that's kind of not true. It is still, so I'm going to add, this is a cup and a quarter of couscous. So I'm going to put it in here and mix it all up to coat it with all the spices. So couscous is more like a pasta than it is like a grain. That's because it's made from semolina flour, which has, you know, semolina flour is not like normal all-purpose white flour. It's not been refined as much and bleached and all that stuff. So it still does have a good amount of protein and fiber in the flour, which is great. And the only other ingredient besides the flour in couscous is water. That's it. So it's pretty close to being a grain, you know. It has a lot of the same nutrients and it's not processed nearly as much as white pasta would be. However, I'm not shaming white pasta. White pasta has its place in a healthy, well-rounded diet, which I will explain in one sec. I'm also gonna add stock. I have vegetable stock. This was one that we made in-house. It has no salt. So the salt in this dish comes in part from the halloumi. That's a salty cheese similar to feta. And it comes in a salty brine, like a liquid that comes in the package, and it's very salty. So there is salt in the halloumi, but also we're gonna just be adding salt and pepper to taste to this dish. I don't know if you could hear that sizzle, but it sizzled. So I'm adding 1.5 cups of stock. So this is the point where we get to scrape up the bottom of the pan. So I'm gonna make sure I focus on that right now. So I was talking about pasta before. So pasta, you know, if you've ever noticed, if you eat like just plain white pasta with regular old tomato sauce, which is delicious, sometimes you might notice that you're pretty hungry like an hour or two later. That's because white pasta doesn't have the protein and the fiber and the other micronutrients to help to keep you full for a long time. Couscous, pearl couscous, and the other kind of couscous that's like little teeny tiny pieces, those are good options if you want a pasta texture. Or other options for pasta to help keep you more full are, there are pastas that are made from lentils and chickpeas and things like that. Those are very filling. They have very high protein and fiber. If you compare the nutrition facts next time you're in the grocery store, compare one of those, you know, pastas made with beans, or even just a whole wheat pasta, compare that to the white pasta, and you'll see the difference. Protein and fiber is what helps to keep you full. So even if you eat a giant plate of white pasta, it's still not gonna keep you as satisfied over, you know, several hours as a smaller plate of whole wheat pasta or pasta made from legumes. So you can see this is bubbling up a little bit. That's the goal. We put the stock in here. I scraped it up from the bottom. The stock is a really beautiful color. It's like a deep orange color. And that's from the burnt stuff that was on the bottom of the pan that's now been released. And it's from all the spices that we've added. So this has come to a boil. I'm gonna make sure I scraped everything from the bottom because I don't want to lose it. And then we're gonna cover this up and set it aside and make our holiday mocktail recipe. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more holiday-ish. And mocktails are such an awesome way to, you know, make drinking at a party fun without regretting it the next day. Mocktails are also just fun for you to make at home, you know, by yourself or with your family. When I was testing this recipe at home, I had all the leftover juices. I'm just gonna set this aside. How do I wanna do this? I'm gonna move the pot, then the induction burner, because I don't wanna drop anything, so hold on a second.
Yeah, how did it smell?
How does this smell?
Yeah, could you smell anything?
Smells amazing.
Amazing. I figured.
Yeah, it smells great. It smells like turmeric. Turmeric has a good like earthy flavor, so does cumin. So it's some of those familiar scents, but also leeks provide such a unique, you know, aromatic experience. You know, like onions make you cry when you cut them. Shallots are even worse. Leeks don't do that. So they're not as strong. You know, the flavor and the aroma is not as strong, but it's basically like a delicate onion, if that makes sense. Okay, so I put that aside. I'm also gonna put my lid on it too, because I want to try and keep the moisture in there to try and plump up that couscous. All right, so I want to just move some things around to make more space. And then we'll make our mocktail. All right. So I had a glass of ice. Now it's mostly water. I'm gonna take these gloves off and I'm gonna use whatever ice is left in here. I'm gonna just drain out the water. All right, so we've got some ice. And I've already pre-juiced some of these ingredients just to make the time go a little bit faster. So we've got our glass of ice and we have a few different options for the ingredients. So again, modify it to whatever you like, modify it based on what ingredients you have available to you. So I've got some lemon juice. I've got blood orange juice. You can see the like red in that orange. We've got a little bit of blood orange juice and I have that slice because I'm going to try and use that as a garnish at the end. I've got some cranberries. These are just frozen cranberries. And I've got some rosemary that we're going to use as a garnish as well. I love rosemary. Such a good, nice seasonal smell. So also, to make it bubbly, I have some ginger ale. Also, you could use seltzer if you wanted. I've also got some cranberry juice, or this is cranberry juice cocktail. That's the most common one to find. Cranberry juice that's just cranberry, not cocktail, is almost like way too tart. It's like almost unbearable. So cranberry juice cocktail gives you the gist of cranberry. And if you did not go with the ginger ale, you could add a little bit of sweetener. This is agave nectar. You could do that if you wanted, if you like a sweeter drink. So we've got roughly, this is probably a quarter cup of lemon juice. So I'm going to toss that in here. I've got a little more than a quarter cup of blood orange juice. I'm going to take this slice out because I want to use that for the garnish. So we've got some blood orange juice. I'm going to add that in there. Blood orange juice is like, compared to regular orange juice, it's a little sweeter. I also have, you could do just regular orange juice as well if you can't find blood orange juice, or if you already have this and it just makes sense to use it, you can do that. And we've got, of course, our cranberry juice cocktail to make it that really pretty purpley red color. And I'm just kind of eyeballing this. That's the beauty of this kind of thing. And topping it off with the bubbly. You could also use, if you like ginger flavor, you can do ginger beer. That's non-alcoholic. It's just very gingery, much more gingery than ginger ale. So I feel like when you're making a mocktail, it's important to have some kind of a bubbly thing in there to make it feel like maybe it's got Prosecco in it, you know? So we've got this beautiful purpley red drink here. We've got our little blood orange slice. We're just going to perch that right on the edge. We've got our cranberries here as well. And I have a couple sprigs of rosemary. I'm just going to stick those in there. So of course you don't eat the rosemary. You could, but you don't eat the rosemary while you're drinking this. But the experience of, like, you know, smelling it while you take a sip is always fun. And I'm just going to do, I feel like odd numbers are always a nice look. So I've added 3 little cranberries here. You can see how this looks. It's really,
I love the color.
I know, it's so pretty and so delicious. I can predict already. That's so good. Yeah, the blood orange juice. Have either of you tried blood orange before? Yeah.
Yeah, it is sweeter.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it's super good. Like this one, this slice is not actually as red as a lot of them are. Sometimes you cut into it and it's like almost black. It's so purple, it's almost black.
Yeah, I don't see them that often in the store.
Yeah. And I have a whole one. Hold on one sec. Sometimes they're hard to identify because like
Okay, yeah,
it kind of looks like maybe it's a regular orange with something wrong with it.
right, yeah. No, I have seen them now that you show me it like that.
Yeah. And yeah, on the little sticker, it's not focusing, but it says blood orange on the sticker down the bottom there. So it looks like an orange with like a darker peel. So next time you see one, you can of course just peel it and eat it as is. You can juice it, you can garnish things with it, you know, citrus has endless possibilities. Also with something like this drink, if you are, you know, hosting a party or if you really like this drink and you want to make a bigger batch, it's a good idea to not add the carbonated part until it's, you know, you're ready to drink it, because, you know, it's going to lose its bubbliness. It gets a little flat and changes the flavor and the experience. So if you, wait here so you can see it under the camera. But yeah, if you mix together all of the juices and all the other components of it, if you were using agave or some kind of sweetener, you can mix that in as well and keep it in the fridge. Like I said, as I was testing this recipe at home, I had all of these juices in my fridge and I started just like, I had already written this rough recipe and I was like, well, now I have all these juices. So I was combining everything and just making like fun little beverages to drink with dinner, even though they're just juice. You know, it's an important thing. Amina can tell you, 5:57, wow. I was just talking about mocktails to our team about how important it is to, you know, not always drink just alcohol at parties. It's very good to throw in some non-alcoholic drinks as well. So I'm going to grab this pot and take a look. Okay. So it's definitely soaked up most of the liquid. I'm going to use my wooden spoon and toss it around. You can see it's kind of oozing slowly back, so it's still got a little bit of liquid in there. But actually, this is a good time to do our final ingredients. I'm also going to just taste this real quick, because that is the ultimate way to know if the couscous is at the texture you want. Yeah, this would be like al dente, which means to the T. So you can like tell when you bite into it that it's got a little bit of texture, a little bit of like the middle of it is not as soft as the rest of it. All right. So I'm going to add some spinach and some frozen peas right now. So I've got about a half cup of frozen peas. And actually, truthfully, these are not quite frozen anymore. But even if they were frozen, you can toss them in there anyway, because these thaw in a second. And I've got some spinach. I'm going to just grab 2 big handfuls of spinach. There's one. Spinach is one of the leafy greens that kind of like disappears the most. Like you think you have so much of it, and when you cook it, it's like, whoa, where did that go? So adding 2 big handfuls is totally fine. So we're just tossing this around. And at this point, we have not added, in the recipe, we did have some salt and pepper in there, but I've not added any of that because I like to taste it at the end and see how much is actually needed. So this spinach is softening up a little bit. I'm going to bring that burner back over here so I can make sure it's got enough heat on it. So this would still be, we brought the stock to a boil earlier, and then we reduced it to a simmer, so this would still be on the simmer temperature. So that's like a medium low, not quite low. Sometimes that's not enough heat. So, I mean, you saw how fast this couscous cooked. It's very quick. And as with everything, this is just proving my point about things being small and cooking more quickly. You know, these little tiny pearls cooked more quickly than regular pasta. So I'm gonna add some salt. When I tasted it before, it definitely needed some salt. So we've got that. I'm gonna do some black pepper. And if you are cooking, you know, in a pot like this that, you know, looks kind of nice, you can always finish the dish and then serve it in this pot. Just as a, you know, bring it to the table in this pot and people can serve themselves. Rather than having to like scoop it out into a serving bowl. Especially because of the way we're gonna finish off the halloumi. So yeah, the spinach, like, you know, how much spinach did I add in there? And it's like, you know, totally incorporated at this point. All right, so our halloumi, I'm just gonna put this in by hand. So I'm gonna like nestle it in here. So this is why it's kind of nice to serve it in this dish, because you can put it all on display like that. We've got a few more pieces too that were not in here, but let's put them in the back. And that halloumi, because it was just sitting at room temp, it's at room temp now. So you could put the lid on and let it just warm up a tiny bit more and come to be the same temperature as the rest of the dish. And again, because this is cheese, there's, you know, you don't have to stress about like checking the temperature of the inside, making sure it was cooked enough like you would with chicken or fish. Cheese, you know, you always want to store cheese at the right temperature, storing it in the refrigerator. But when it comes to cooking, you know, as long as you're eating it within 4 hours, it doesn't really matter what temperature it is. So that makes it easier. So we've got our dish here. If you wanted to scoop it out onto a plate, you could. But we've got one more ingredient, which is our herbs. Always good to garnish with some herbs. We've got 3 different kinds of herbs here. We've got flat leaf parsley. Gonna pick those off the stem and rip them up a little bit. We've got some cilantro as well. And we have fresh mint. So I'm just gonna rip these, just loosely ripping them up, sprinkling them on top. Mint is a really unique flavor and a unique looking, trying to open up this leaf to show you. It's got some cool texture to the leaf. And mint is actually like a classical pairing with halloumi. Mint I know is not for everybody, but it does add a nice flavor. And we've got cilantro as well. So I know cilantro is not for everybody either, but if you just did parsley, or even if you did no herbs, you know, it's not going to make or break the dish, but it definitely adds some really great flavor when you do garnish with herbs at the end. And I'm going to turn it off because that is our dish. We've got this super delicious, savory, a little bit spicy, a little bit sweet even, vegetarian dish.
That looks
Any
amazing.
questions?
Who gets to eat this now?
Me and Amelia.
I was just gonna say that. I hope you
I'm
guys are
so
gonna eat it.
jealous.
Good question. I mean, part of the reason why I like to make recipes that I enjoy, because it
Yeah.
becomes in there. But also, this is like such a cool dish. Halloumi cheese
Yeah.
is the chef at my old job where I used to work introduced me to halloumi, and it like opened my eyes to the world of cheese. Halloumi is just, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah, I encourage you to try making this dish. Like I showed you, it's not difficult. I think I got a little behind time because I was just elaborating so much, but if you weren't talking to an audience, then this goes very fast. And I've been including, in the last few classes, we've been including the prep work in the class, like chopping things and all of that, just to show that you can make a really, really delicious, easy meal with multiple ingredients in under an hour. So this is one example.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this because the prepping, the food prepping part of cooking is the part that I'm least skilled at and I feel most intimidated by. So I find it really helpful to attend these sessions.
That's great. I'm so glad. And that's the part that's not fun either, right? Like
Yeah.
to spend 45 minutes chopping vegetables. Like that's so boring and annoying. So if you can
Exactly.
do it all in a very short time, I feel like it's so helpful to know that you can make a very filling, well-rounded meal start to finish in under an hour.
Happy holidays. Have a nice dinner, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Happy
very much.
holidays.
Happy holidays.